So just out of curiosity, how many of you guys are part of churches that already release music? Okay, a couple. How many want that to happen? Okay.
Good question.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious in the room. So we are talking about writing room to release.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you're here for?
If
not, we'll talk about whatever. So we're approaching this like a little bit thematically, but also really practically. Like I want you guys to have some like really practical steps as far as like how you can actually make this happen. But then also just some of the things that we've learned, good and bad, in that process at Crosspoint specifically. So we touched on this a little bit. I'll just kind of jump in if we're at that spot. Well, can we pray first? Just real quick. Jesus, thank you. Just thank you for this time. Thank you for this group of people, God. Thank you for just the desire for them to experience your word through music at the church. God, we just pray an anointing on these souls, these lives, these people. God, that your will be done in their churches, in their songs, in their communities. Lord, and you would give us the words to say. Amen.
Amen. A quick intro?
Yeah, let's do that. Yes. Start with you.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl. So honored to be here. Literally can't believe I get to be here. So thank you. I'm really honored. What a sweet time of worship we had. I mean, that was like, the presence of the Lord is so sweet. So grateful. You probably don't know me. I'm a mom of two. I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-month-old. So if I fall asleep for a quick nap, don't worry about it. I'm a worship pastor at Crosspoint Church. And I've been a part of that church for 7 years. Been on the worship team about 6. Moved to Nashville 16 years ago as entertainer, the next Faith Hill, the next Trisha Yearwood, and went to Belmont University. Played basketball, was a vocal major, finished with a music business degree, and jumped right into being a music director at a church. The same year that I signed a songwriting and artist development deal with Sony ATV. So that was 2012. That I signed with them. I had already been a part of a church for a couple of years as a music director right out of college. What a gift. Also, I was scared to death. Toured the country a little bit as a country artist and a background vocalist, and it really wasn't until maybe 2011, so 10 years ago, that I started really going, okay, if I want to do this music business thing, I need to give it a shot in the writing room, because that was never a part of my upbringing. And it felt like when I jumped into a writing room, everyone was ahead of me. And I was like, I'm not down for that, But I think the best advice is just to get into a room and be available. And so I started doing that, and it was country songs, and they were a little bit angsty. And I was definitely singing about some heartbreak and cheating songs, right? Country music, and was still leading worship at churches. And people would say, hey, why aren't you doing a worship thing or writing for the church? And I'd always said, this is my way of serving in the church, is leading worships, is where I feel that God has me. But the moment he turned my heart to write songs for the church, I would be up for it. And it also felt at the time that all the songs had already been written. I didn't see the value in it. Let's just sing all the songs that everybody else has written. And then 2017, at Crosspoint, I was in a full-time job as a creative coordinator, and jumped out because I felt like the Lord was calling me back into songwriting after I had gotten out of my country deal 2 years prior, and was like, I don't know if it's country, I don't know if it's worship, I'm not sure. And I just started worshiping the Lord in my own time, in my creative space. And my husband is a really talented musician, and I'd literally be in the shower and I'd be like, hey, bring me my phone, I've got an idea. Or I'd say, hey, go grab your guitar. He's like, really? It's 11 o'clock. I'd be like, yes, I've got an idea. And the Lord, I really think I just started meeting with him out of a place of purity, not looking for a song, but just clinging to him. because I was in a desperate place of I don't know where as an adult I don't know where that next step is supposed to go. I moved here thinking I was going to be this big artist. I gave it a shot in songwriting. The doors had been closed, and so I really just started going, Jesus, what do you want? And he said, Cheryl, I want you to dream again. And so I started just worshiping him from my honest, pure place. And that was where he started meeting me. And you know, when you get into the presence, if you got a pad, you're going to write something. You know, whether it's the same line over and over, whether you get into psalming, a song will break through. So that was where I really started writing worship, was in the last 4 years. And then almost every session has been with this guy right here who's been writing Christian music for much longer than me. And Chrissy was actually a huge influence in my writing. I had approached country music as, okay, it's like a blind date. You go on like 5 blind dates a week. And you're like, okay, I hope we get one today. You know, that somebody cuts or that I can record. And with worship music, because it started out for me from a pure place, that was something I knew I needed to fight for. That I didn't show up to songwriting sessions with really prolific writers or really seasoned worship writers and go, okay, I gotta do really good today. I wanted to keep it pure. In writing with Mike and with Chrissy was really somebody that I was like, whoa, but she wanted to worship. And that was where our first song was birthed. So that has been my story the last 4 years. I get to write for the church. I get to lead our worship leaders in community and kind of help vision for the future of where we go as a worship team and as a worship culture. So I'm just really honored to get to do that. I haven't written a country song in a long time, so I probably still got it in me, but yeah, I love writing songs for the Lord and for our local church.
Yeah, and you guys, I mean, you got to experience the anointing that is on this girl this morning. But so my story quickly, we said it a little bit last night. Moved to Nashville to go to Belmont University. It's a super long story, but I'll just tell you, in 8th grade, I came up here to Nashville, and the guys in Jars of Clay, if you know that band, brought me up, and we recorded 3 songs, and those guys were the band on it, and it was like mind blown at that point in my life. And I remember thinking desperately, like, those guys, that connection is my only way into music. And not their fault, but that was like ended up being like a huge heartbreak for me, because I mean, they were busy doing big things, and you know, here I was sitting in Orlando, Florida, just like waiting for a phone call that never came. But I do remember leaving Nashville at that age feeling like I was leaving home. Like, it was very weird. And so by the time I got to college, I knew Nashville's the only spot I wanted to go. Belmont was the only school I applied for. Came up here. I'd been leading worship, you know, through middle school and high school. And at that point, I was already kind of jaded, honestly, for the music business. I was like, I want nothing to do with it. I just want to lead worship. And literally within the first 2 weeks of my freshman year, I found myself writing a song with some guys that turned into a band that was called Mike's Chair, that then took up 15 years of my life. And don't ask about the band name, because there's nothing deep and cool about it. It's literally a chair with my name on it. That if you had told me a decision you made when you were 18 was going to follow you to 36, you probably would have changed it. So I found myself like touring the country and doing pop rock CCM music. My heart, though, has always been worship. And I would, as often as I could, I would lead worship at church, and as often as I could would influence the songs that we wrote with the band towards kind of a worship element. And there just came a point where I knew that season was done. And that was right at the time that the guys at the church were like, hey, we'd love to talk to you about like coming over here and writing songs for the church. And it just felt like a very natural progression for me. And so I went full-time at the church, and part of what we were tasked with was like establishing a worship culture and original music songwriting culture. You would think, being in Nashville, that would have been in place at our church already. But kind of what we talked about a little bit last night, leadership does play a big part in how quickly something like that can develop or not. So know that like as we're going, if you guys have questions at any point, please just raise your hand and we can address things as we go, or you can wait to the end. But so anyway, so just kind of jumping in. I talked a little bit about it last night. But if you're at a spot where you're like, hey, we're kind of starting at zero, meaning we've got people who long to see original music in our church. We long to write, record, release songs, but we haven't even started. Then a lot of what I talked about last night, the first thing on our list, we're kind of going to walk through like 7 pillars, if you will. So the first pillar is worship culture. So you've got to establish a culture of worship in your church, right? So amongst your team specifically. Because what we have found is when the smaller group of worshipers unite and get together around it, that then overflows and starts to affect the church at large. You can't just start on Sunday at the platform and expect everybody to follow, right? Like you need to kind of start smaller, and it takes time. And so when I first started, yes, we wrote, but we weren't like intentional about writing songs for a while.
For our local church.
Yeah, and I was telling Cheryl last night, I remember, there's a guy on our team who we love, but he's just like really blunt. And
you all have those.
I was in my position for probably about 6 to 8 months, and he was frustrated. He was like, dude, like you were brought here to like help us get going with writing songs. Like, why aren't we doing that? And I just remember having that conversation of like, there was a lot of things that needed to shift before the focus was writing songs. So if you're in that season, I just want to encourage you, like investing in culture. If you don't start there, the rest of the 6 are going to be an uphill fight. And it's just, you're going to be like, why is this not working? It's because this wasn't established.
You'll meet resistance along the way, even if you have that culture. Which I told Mike, I was like, honestly, I want to share the definition of culture, because I feel like it's a little bit of a hot word, like, oh, the culture, like, be part of the culture. We're building a culture. It's like, what do you even know what culture means? Like, let's look at it. So as a noun, it's the customs, arts, or manifestations of a people regarded collectively. So it can't just be Mike and I doing a thing and leaving our worship leaders, leaving our band leaders behind, leaving other staff on music team behind. We had to ask the Lord for help on how do we be inclusive. This is not exclusive to the Mike and Cheryl show. As a verb, which I thought this was really interesting, it's to maintain in conditions suitable for growth. So like, for example, scientists attempt to culture bacterial cells. To culture as a verb has to come from a place where it can grow. You can have a toxic culture and it will disintegrate. But if you have a culture where you are including everyone and seeking Jesus together, that will be the perfect place where it is suitable for growth. So I was like, man, that'll preach in itself. So those definitions of culture in itself, customs, art, manifestations of a people regarded collectively. So it is recognizing there is a group. It is not the Amanda show. It is not the Cheryl show. It's not the Mike show. The verb is to maintain conditions suitable for growth. So if there is something, as you think about the worship culture of your team, is it inclusive or is it exclusive? Is it toxic or is it something that you would want to be a part of? Just think about those things.
So practically speaking there, this wasn't intentional, but the fact that it's in that definition is cool. We started this thing called the Worship Leader Collective. And basically we were like, how do we because Crosspoint's multi-site, so we have multiple locations. Every week, all of our worship leaders are spread out between different spots.
There's 25 of us, so trying to get even just that crew is like, are we all aligned?
It's hard. So we decided we're going to do this thing called Worship Leader Collective, which was once a month at the time.
For 4 years ago, we did the first Monday of every month. It was a Monday night.
And we literally get together and start off with old school worship, like acoustic guitar in a circle, none of the lights, none of the stage, none of the stuff that comes with a Sunday. And almost like developing that culture again from the ground up, which is like, why did we all fall in love with worship?
No tracks, no click.
Yeah, why did we all fall in love with like doing this in the first place? It had nothing to do with anything that happens on a Sunday, right? Like it all started in the secret, in the quiet place. And so what's cool is, talk about the culture building, is that, it went from the worship leaders, and then we were like, man, this is so good. Let's invite our band leaders. Like, we need our band leaders to get in on this. So
it was worship and training. So it was like worship, but also let's do some training. Let's bring in other worship pastors. Let's bring in vocal coaches, things that would help train us. The three things we would say is these worship collectives will help you grow in community, grow in faith, and grow in skill. So we wanted it to be a value for our team to show. So.
Right. So it went from that, extended to band leaders / like key musicians, because it's like, man, they need to be able to go where our worship leaders are going. And then eventually now it's just called the Creative Collective, where it's literally designers, photographers, worshipers. I mean, it's turned into everything, but it just shows you how if you start small and you kind of add as it makes sense, eventually it is the whole group, and that's when you really start to see culture shift, and especially shift on Sundays. So that's pillar number one, is just culture. Start there, don't rush it. Take the time, like you'll know when your team or your church is ready to kind of progress in that culture.
Let me add to that.
Yeah.
It's got to be a place of healthy worship and a healthy emotion. When it comes to people who are in the spotlight, and you know this if you're on a stage at all, there are going to be people that go, I don't sound like her, I don't look like her. And you'll see the enemy put competition and put unhealthy emotion attached to a very pure place. So as the people who get to kind of make those changes, or that can speak into that, walk one-on-one with those people, break down every wall of competition. As a woman coming in, I knew that I had a strong voice, but when I had girls say, to be honest with you, I didn't like you the first 6 months, I was like, hold on, let's start there. This is not a competition, but that is what the enemy does to distort our view of what we're doing and what God wants to do in His kingdom. So if you sense it, call it out. It will be awkward, but it will build your team in accountability. So if you're creating culture, create a culture of worship where that is the number one thing. But the emotion has to be healthy too. You've got to talk to your team and train through that.
And just to kind of tell you where we were, and I'll get to you.
I will write it down.
No, we used to have.
671. No, it'll pop up on the screen.
We would have an instance where, like, if somebody led Oceans for the first time on a Sunday, it was like, oh, well, that's Cheryl's song. I don't think. Like, that's where we started as a culture, to where now it's a spot where it's like, the differences are celebrated, because I can't tell you how many times I've sat down with people and said, listen, I've already got Cheryl. I don't need Cheryl. I need you. Like the church needs you, your voice, your expression, your sweetness. She's a powerhouse. That's awesome. But we need someone who's like tender and meek and can like soften hearts. So it really is knowing your people and really, like we said last night, calling them up like in their strength. It's not about this is the vocal we need across the board. It's like, no, we need the nuances, because Cheryl reaches people that I can't. I reach people she can't. We all are going to connect with different people. So that's super
I think
important.
the practical statement you can write down is what you bring to this team is necessary for revival in someone's life.
That's so good. Sorry, your question.
Oh, that's okay. I'm super grateful. So we just moved to Texas, and I'm kind of doing this with a team there. How long did it take for you guys to see, like, from the small writing group to a Sunday, like the shift in the worship culture on Sunday?
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Well, circumstances are.
Because that's like my dream.
Yes.
I'm just curious.
I think it's a little bit of trial and error, if I'm honest. Sometimes you're going to push things and go, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that so quick. But for us, we had lost our founding pastor after 15 years. We were singing the same songs, but we were singing them from a different place.
Yeah.
And I would say if we did not have that loss where people were like, we don't know what's next, but we feel like God's calling us to this place, we were handed like, this is how you access the Lord from desperation. But I would say if your pastor doesn't leave, your founding pastor is there, or there isn't some great loss, I probably would have gone, how do we reach a level of desperation where we're singing the same songs, but we're singing them from a different place? Because I think that was like a huge like change to the culture of our team.
Yeah.
But
But I mean, just to answer your question practically, it took well over a year of like really starting like monthly, and then outside of that, like meeting one-on-one with worship leaders, really like working with people on Sundays. I mean, it really is like you have to shift your spot from like, ooh, I schedule and help make Sundays happen, to like, no, I am intentionally
through the week.
Working this throughout a week.
And I think you're gaining trust with your volunteers and your worship leaders if you're sitting with them at coffee or at lunch. And you're like, tell me what God's speaking to you. Tell me what, me and another guy on our music team went through a year where we realized there was no feedback. There was no healthy feedback in our worship team. And we were like, that is a value. We can't have all these blind spots and just say, we're moving forward, but we never evaluate what we're doing. So we brought that to our team too, to say, hey, where are we winning? What do you like that we're doing? Where are we winning? What is something you think we could improve? And then if you could have the whole worship team, what would you say to them? Almost like if you're a leader, like, what is your heart?
Right, and that's the thing, transitioning our leaders from renters to owners. Meaning you don't just show up and do your thing and then you're done. It's like, no, you are an owner in this culture. And your presence here matters so much, to the point that like, if we don't hear from you, you are robbing us of something. So just really instilling that into your leaders. And
then where you think you've said the same thing over and over, say it again.
It's true, vision leaks.
Vision leaks. So if you say it over and over, like, I've said this 12 times, say it 13 and 14 until it's caught and everybody owns it.
How quickly did you see a transition of those who maybe weren't really committed? How quickly did you see the filtering out of the undedicated? Because that's got to be a strain on when you're trying to lead, when you're like recognizing someone maybe, because you're going to engage them, you're going to ask them questions and want them to be a part. But at some point, there may be a realization that comes to you or maybe to them. How long was that? Or was that continual, or do you see it kind of at some point, we didn't see the filtering more because people understood the culture?
It's both.
I think it's continual. But I think once you start meeting with people one-on-one, the leave is a little bit less toxic. It's a little bit like, we literally, so our longest serving worship leader, the girl named Erin, she's been serving on our team for 13 years. We had lunch a month ago, and she said, she was crying, and she goes, Cheryl, I feel like I'm done leading worship. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she goes, I feel like the graces of leading worship have been lifted off of me.
Interesting. So it was her who saw that.
Yes, but she was like, I love what God is doing in this team. I love what God is doing in this church. But we have to trust that the Holy Spirit will speak also. But if we're stewarding well what He's given us, then there will be a less toxic environment of, up yours, church. Like, we all know those very divisive leaves. But there's a little bit more of a, you know what, we're in tune, and God has a promised land for them and a promised land for us.
And sometimes continually there are conversations with people on the team that I'm like, hey, Taylor spoke to it a little bit last night, which is like, hey, we love you. We want to protect your gift and your reputation with the team. So let's talk about these things. Like when you walk in with this, the whole team feels it.
That's good.
So like, what's going on? Let's talk about it. And honestly, what you find is sometimes people just need a place to talk. And if you give them that, it really will shift. And then sometimes if it doesn't, that's when we really start having the harder conversation of, hey, like let's take a break. Like you just need to like sit in the seat and worship. Like from the congregation, like lead from that spot for a while. And then let's talk about what it looks like to get back up and lead. But like you said, when culture starts to shift, there's resistance, right? It's, wait, this isn't how we've always done it. Like, what's happening here?
That's right.
And so you constantly have to, that's why vision is so important. You have to tell people, this is where we are, this is where we're going, this is how we're going to get there. Like, we want you to come with us, and invite everyone to come, knowing that some people might not.
They're gonna miss the bus.
And it's okay. Like,
Yeah.
like I think the Lord has taught us a lot about seasons. You know, and sometimes seasons are 30 years, sometimes they're 3 months. And someone can still be super faithful in 3 months, and it's their time to go. You know what I mean? So don't be discouraged if people leave. Be encouraged about what that means for you on the other side of it, which is what's God going to bring to you, because He always does. I think we need to keep, oh wait, there was a question.
Oh, yes.
If you could repeat those questions, you said, where are we winning?
Yeah.
What should we be improving?
Where are the blind spots?
What we call blind spots. What am I not seeing that we could do better?
And then what would you say?
If you had the whole worship team right before you, what would you share with them? And like Mike said, it kind of gets them from a mental state of renters to owning, to a different kind of leadership.
Right.
If we have time, I'd like to jump.
Okay,
Because like that's like such a buzzword now. It's like ownership.
Yeah.
But like, like the practical, because you can model it, you can say it, ad nauseum, and then it's like.
Well, part of it
I
is,
want to take up.
no, just to speak quickly, is you as a leader have to be willing to allow people to own it, right? So that means when we did worship collectives, we rarely led worship. At Crosspoint, it's very different at every church, but we're one church, many locations, and we all sing the same worship set. Which means, for the most part, a lot of our worship leaders aren't having to like pick sets and do all that stuff throughout a week.
So they could just show up.
Yeah, they can just show up and kind of do their thing and then leave. So finding opportunities for them to own that. So it's like, hey, we want to hear your expression in this. Finding spots for them to own it.
Yeah.
Literally. So
you're either a consumer or you're adding to it, right? So that you're creating the product or you're consuming the product.
Yeah.
And ultimately, going back to this is not the Mike and Cheryl show, we needed a front line of people who wanted to go first together, shoulder to shoulder. And the only way to do that is if they were like, I believe in this, I want to be a part. We're like, okay, what do you think? Okay, go do that with 4 people. Or, hey, when you lead the Bellevue campus, will you gather your team and lead them in prayer? Or will you say, hey man, this is what I'm bringing to worship today? Or this is the sacrifice of me being here today. Like giving, not us scripting out moments even on stage, which is where we used to be. It was like, if we want owners instead of renters, let's not spoon feed them, but let's put them out there. Let's equip them to create a different heartfelt approach to the same songs. So try to figure out creative ways where it's not like I'm spoon feeding, but what is God teaching you in this season? Okay, can you communicate that from stage and to your team?
Yeah.
Number 2?
Yeah, let's do it. Oh,
I
one
usually
thing.
wear a watch and I keep.
There's a book called The Reset, Jeremy Riddle.
Yeah.
Going through that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a great place to start
Yeah.
with the team. As far as like getting everyone aligned, everybody asking questions, everybody really thinking through worship and why we're doing it and why we're writing songs and
Let the uncomfortable conversations happen.
Yeah.
I think we want to avoid, but let them happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, that podcast, the Redmond and Riddle podcast,
Yeah, so good.
is one of the best things I've heard in years
Ooh.
about like worship, writing.
Yeah.
It's so good.
That's good.
So good.
Okay, number 2.
Yeah, let's go.
From that culture, which I put in parentheses, heart and exposure, songs are birthed.
Yeah.
It was said a few years ago when we got our new pastor, Pastor Kevin Queen. He was kind of like, what comes first? Do the songs bring revival or does revival bring songs? It's like the chicken or the egg, But the truth is that whenever there's a move of God, songs are going to be birthed. The creatives are going to create. So yeah, do you want to take it?
Yeah, so from there practically, is once it kind of felt like, okay, there's unity in our churches, there's unity amongst our leaders. That's when naturally, so at Crosspoint every Tuesday is like a prayer hour, and it's really not organized. I mean, it
no
is,
program.
but there's no
Just
program. It's
prayer
very
and
different than like our Sunday. But from that, it's open to anyone and everyone. And from that, like naturally, I remember multiple times, and Cheryl can talk about this, but somebody would walk into the room and be like, man, I was just praying and this, and it's like, yo, let's write that, and it would just naturally be an overflow of the culture, an overflow of what was happening. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to sit down and we're going to write a worship hit. It was like, no, what does our church need to hear? What is God saying, right? And before we even wrote songs, I remember we did kind of like a psalming thing with the worship leaders. We had a good friend of ours come in and he just played, and it wasn't singing. Well, it was kind of like open your Bibles and just read scripture. Sing it if you want. Like getting our people used to just off the cuff. Like this isn't, we're not going to tell you what to do. Like you are going to lead the room, Kind of like what happened this morning. It's like take that back to your spots, because once that starts happening, then naturally you're going to be like, man, that little thing, that little hooky thing you were doing during the prayer time, like let's go write that, and then songs start to come out of that. Yeah. So that's kind of the natural progression, the natural overflow. You have culture, right? From culture, you start getting ideas. You start like little things of songs start coming. Then you start getting a little bit more organized about songwriting. So now it's being intentional about getting in rooms with people. It's intentional about that's when we kind of started the songwriting community at the church, where we had such a need for people who wanted to be involved. So we basically created this thing where it was open for anyone and everyone. And again, it's culture, it's heart, but it's also very practical. So it's like we wanted to teach people the craft of songwriting, right? So the basics of what does it mean to get in a room and write songs, and then that progressed into actually putting people in rooms and writing songs, right? So that will kind of get us to 3.
Yep, number 3. Start working songs into Sunday.
So working songs into Sunday. So, a lot of people are like, I wrote a song, I think it's amazing, let's put it in the set. Well, yes, maybe, right? I think it's really important for you to have somebody else in leadership at your church that is support. So for us in that, our creative pastor was someone who we could say, man, here's some songs we wrote, right? And he would help by saying, man, these couple feel like there's something on them. And it's like, okay. So it wasn't like, hey, Mike and Cheryl, we wrote these songs, we're going to play these songs, we're going to release, like, it's not just us, like, doing everything and making the decisions where it can feel a little toxic. It's really good to have kind of, I think, a third trusted pastor or leader at your church to kind of help support it, to where it doesn't feel like you're just pushing your songs, right? So once we kind of decided on those songs, it was like, at first, it felt really scary, because we went from playing only hits on Sunday morning to like, how do we put in our song that no one's gonna know? And you've been in a worship service where like everyone's like going for it, and then they're like, you know what I mean? You're like, oh, we don't want that to be our song.
Yeah. And then you over the years you work up like, well, our first song 1 has to be up tempo and engaging, and we can't end the set with a new song because nobody's gonna know it. And it was like, well, where do we introduce the new song?
Right. So one thing that we did very practically, and again, everyone's services are set up different. We came from a spot where we used to do like a closing song every week, right? One of the things that I found that was really effective was really trying to find moments. So I would meet with our pastor every week, and he would tell us where he's going, what he's talking about, and I would have a Rolodex of songs in my head. And I would wait until the right moment, like, we've got a song, like we need to connect the message with the song, right? So it's not just like this random song that we're introducing that we think is cool, but it actually, there's a purpose for the new song in the context of the service.
It's like in line with the teaching.
Yeah, and so then for our pastor to lead into that song with context for the song, and he to say, hey, this is a song that the team wrote, you know, and it's not us saying, hey, we wrote a song, and there's just a different authority there.
Yes.
And so that would help us introduce a new song. So then the following week, we could put it in the worship set, and it doesn't feel like this random new song. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if your services are set up like that, or can be, that's a really great way to introduce new original music, especially with the support of your pastor, which is huge. And so then from there...
Well, that was number 3. Start working songs into Sunday. And as like a subtitle is Sunday songs versus release songs.
Yeah, so you're going to know, like I said last night a little bit, if you're in a position at your church to be the champion of music, like, you can't... The team used to always make fun of me because they'd be like, oh, here he goes again, pushing another song. And I'm like, well, that's
our job.
That's what I'm here for. Like, the Lord has called me here to like get some songs to our church. But you kind of have to be that person, which is like, yo, I've got 3 songs. I want you to hear all of them.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, this song would be perfect. Like, constantly thinking through the songs, right? Like, kind of owning that spot, because what you realize is if you don't, nobody is gonna. And so it's not, those songs are not just gonna magically start working in your church. Like, you need to be somewhat intentional, you know? So if that's you, or if that's somebody else, you know, that you kind of need to encourage, know that like it took someone to encourage me, a friend of mine that doesn't even go to our church, to say, Mike, he's like, dude, you need to own it. Like, you need to go in and like, if you feel like Crosspoint's a church that is supposed to play original music,
put them in the set.
Put them in the set. It should feel weird when you play somebody else's song. And I was like, all right, here we go. You know, and that's a scary spot. And you kind of have to be okay to hear, I don't know, I don't like that song. You're like, okay, that's cool. We have 10 others, let's go. But once you start introducing the songs, you guys will start to experience, and this is why I say the release is the last step almost. It's number 6 in our process, right? You do not write for a release. You release songs and let the releases tell you when to... You write songs, let the songs tell you when to release them, right? So for us, we would always introduce a new song to the church first. And the church is going to tell you what songs they want and what songs they don't, right? So it's really being in tune to, man, that we would get off the stage and be like, that felt like fire.
They caught it.
Or I'd be like, yikes. We loved it, but it didn't work the way it was. So, yeah.
And I just want to say, like, I've also had really great experience tagging on just doing like the chorus. Onto
a well-known
song.
Yes.
If you don't have a lot of time or space, like
perfect.
Kind of like introducing like the most memorable part, like the bridge of the chorus.
It's a great way to introduce it.
Yeah, that's really good.
I'm going to move this forward for time. So number 3, we start working songs into Sunday. Then there's going to become a difference between Sunday songs and the songs you release.
Let me just touch this really quick.
Go ahead, Mike.
When you write songs, so we do series at our church. You just have to know, like, some songs are literally just for that series. Meaning, man, it was powerful because it connected to the sermon series or the message that day, but it might not be the song that you invest a lot of time and money into to release. So just, you're really looking for what are the songs that we feel like are more, what's the word?
I would say just heartbeats of our church.
Yeah, like bigger vision songs, more so than like, once we get past this series, this song doesn't hit as hard anymore.
Yeah, we had a series called Ache for Eden. And so we did a writing weekend where we wrote songs for that series. And they all were called Home, or like Aching for Home, or Longing for Home. But that doesn't necessarily fit on a Sunday about joy or, about salvation.
Right.
I will say a lot of the songs that have landed, that we have released, when Pastor Kevin came in, if you know your pastor, they have things they always fall back on, whether in their prayer time or the way they lead, the things they kind of fall back on. One of the things that he always says is, would up there come down here? So we've got a song called We're Ready, and the bridge is like, let up there, come down here, eyes to see, ears to hear. So you kind of learn the language of your senior pastor also, and go, man, these are things that are a constant prayer for our church. And then when Mike mentioned the prayer hour, it's open to the public every Tuesday. And it was in those moments where I would grab something. I always took my journal. I would grab something and I would take it into the writing room, and we would introduce songs to the church on Sundays that were birthed from like a really intimate place within our church. So it wasn't like I was like, oh, I was reading scripture on my own and came up with this great idea. That can be great. But it was even a little bit more special that it didn't come from me. I caught it in a room where there was worship and prayer, brought it into the writing room, and then we expounded it.
Yeah.
Okay, number 4. How to decide if a song should be recorded and how many.
Yeah. So that is trial and error, right? So we talked about introducing songs. If we got to the spot where we were like, man, we feel like there's something on this song, so then we would try it, right? Once we tried it in the room, we would try to at least give it 3 weeks. So give a song 3 weeks, because, you know, in the cycle of church, I think they say some people only show up once every 4 weeks.
So like try them every other week.
So yeah, try to space it out to where you can hit as many people as you can. And then also repetition. Again, like I know for radio, you have to hear a song 12 times before you recognize it. So bringing that into your church setting, if you're doing, that's why a lot of churches redo a lot of songs. And like if you go to church and you love worship, you're like, my gosh, we play this song every week. Well, it's because you'll have some people who after 8 months of playing the same song, they'll be like, man, I love that new song. So take that little bit with you. So at least give it 3 weeks to try it, and before you either pitch it or decide to kind of keep going. So let's just say we've got a batch of songs. We've decided, man, these are connecting with our church. I'll just give you our perspective. The only reason why we wrote, released, and filmed worship was specifically for our church, right? So we wanted Sunday expression to not just be on a Sunday. We wanted people to be able to engage these songs throughout the week.
Yeah.
So the release wasn't for the world. The release is so our church can worship throughout the week. And then we would film, meaning video, these songs because we also wanted to teach our church how to engage these songs. So,
which is number 5. How do you want to capture your
so
your song?
For us, that was almost more important than the audio recording.
Audio and video.
We would all, like every release we've ever done, there's a live video that goes with the release because that's an opportunity for us to teach worship outside of a Sunday, right? It's not just about like, oh, the cool lights and the whatever. It's a spot for us to gather our worshipers and to allow people to experience that, right? And so some songs are, like I said, are going to connect, but it's not worth the investment that it takes to actually record and release them. Some, I'll just say this, some you've done a demo and you're like, man, this demo slaps, like it's awesome. So we just released the demo. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't always have to be this full-blown thing, especially if the perspective is, I don't care how it compares to XYZ. You know what I mean?
Elevation.
Yeah, because I think we all go into this thing with this expectation that we are. It's got to live up to what's out there.
Maverick City, even just like
no, it doesn't, and that's where I'm like, you've got to start at the foundation, because if you don't have clear vision for why you're writing, recording, releasing, there's going to come a point where someone's going to go, why are we even doing this? And you're going to go, I don't know, everyone else is doing it. And that's not enough, right? Like you need to have, why does your church write, release music? right?
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll just say the number. Some of it comes down to budget. For us, I was given a budget, right? And this is important. I would go to our executive pastor, who's the money guy, who doesn't really talk. He's very spiritual, but he needs to know like hard facts. You know, like, are we going to make money on this? Are we not? Are we going to lose money? And the way that I always pitched it was, you have to look at this as another ministry arm of our church. Meaning in the same way that you don't make money on groups, you don't make money on missions, you don't make money on XYZ students, go into this saying, as a church, we are willing to invest this much money into this ministry, knowing that we won't get a dime of it back, right? So that way, if you do get a dime back, it's overflow, it's blessing. It's not, whereas some people are like, oh, if we start releasing music, we're gonna make $1 million. And it's like, no. Go into it expecting to make no money, so that's not even an expectation. Like one of the questions last night was, you know, it's seen as a failure because it didn't like blow up. And it's like, no. The fact that your church wrote songs, recorded them, and released them, that is a success. You know?
I have just a quick practical question. So at your church, does Crosspoint have publishing and then your writers, they have 100% publishing, or do your writers do their own? And then the next question is, if you have a writer, a volunteer writer who already has publishing, or like a heavy hitter, you know, that is like somewhere like Tony Wood or something. What do you work out with that writer as opposed to your regular volunteers or staff writers?
So number 6 is once captured, how do you release it? Which we'll talk about distribution, publishing, but publishing, and you could probably talk more specifically, but Crosspoint is not in it to get your publishing. Crosspoint doesn't own any of the publishing of any of our writers' songs. Well, masters, right? Once we've released, I'll let Mike talk about it. So just catch the debris. You're okay. We're gonna be fine.
I'm really passionate about publishing, and especially in the church space, because I know a lot of churches now where if you are hired as a worship leader, you automatically have to sign away your publishing. And I'm really passionate because I'm like, okay, well, is your church a publishing company?
Right.
What are they doing for your songs?
No disrespect, but our staff leaders, they don't have any clue about music.
Right.
Well, then if they leave the church, let's say your worship director becomes the publisher, then he gets a new job, and then you happen to write a song that went around the world or something. That church didn't steward that because and they're just collecting publishing
Well, so let me tell you where we landed practically, because this is a question from my seat that I get from so many churches is, what do we do about publishing? And I'm kind of like, well, are y'all even writing songs? It's like, no, we're and it's like, okay, I get like having the conversation
Don't get the cart before the horse.
But at the same time, my personal opinion is, if you are not a church that is investing a lot of time and money into songs, you have no business touching publishing. Because in my opinion, we are not writing and releasing these songs to make money. We are writing and releasing these songs for our church, right? And we took a stance of being here in the heart of Nashville. We want to be pro songwriters. We don't want somebody to say, I don't want to get in a room with them because I don't want to have to like sign over all my publishing. So where we landed was this. We don't do publishing deals, meaning in no instance do we take all of somebody's publishing, meaning you're signed with us for X amount of years or whatever. We do what we call SSAs, which are single song agreements. So it's if the church records and releases a song that you're a part of, and you do not have a publishing deal. So if you've already got a publishing deal, it's off the table.
You're out of it.
No, there's no conversation about trying to get any publishing.
You can use me as an example.
Yeah, so Cheryl and I write a lot together. I have a pub deal with a label in town. She did not, right? So my publishing was off the table.
Instead of being smart.
Yeah, she is. No, honestly, she is, because if a song blows up, then she has all the options in the world available to her now.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, if it's so.
Right, you get it.
So basically what we say is, because of the fact that the church is, at our level, investing a lot of money into recording, into videos, into promotion, into marketing, and we are attached to a record label at this point, there's a lot of value for you as a writer to take part in an SSA,
Talk about
right?
the pie analogy.
Yeah, and just so y'all know, publishing is I
We can have
love,
another hour.
I know, I love music business, so if you
Yeah.
want to talk about it, we can. But publishing, so there's 2 pies for every writer. You have a publishing pie and a writer's pie. Writer's pie you never touch, that's always yours. Publishing is a pie that can get split up in all kinds of different ways. But the purpose of this is, you've got somebody who is helping, the word is exploit your song to as many people as possible. So if someone is not doing that, then you should keep this. Because the only reason you're giving this up is, my thought has always been, I can either keep 100% of nothing,
Yeah.
which means, great, I own it all, but my songs aren't doing anything.
Right.
Or if there's value here, I can give up some of it in hopes that all of this
Sure.
rises,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if your church is at a spot where you feel like there is value, then I think, yes, let's have that conversation. If it's not, then be blessed that you've got people that write songs, and if it blows up, guess what? Everybody
Yeah.
is going to rise with that blessing,
Yeah.
right? So I hate it when people get so caught up in the publishing conversation when it literally doesn't matter for
Not time.
most
Yeah.
churches.
Yeah.
I'll just say that.
Yeah.
And it's,
Does that
I like
answer
the
your
single
question?
song. I like the single song too, because what it does is it allows you as a writer to bring in your best,
Yeah.
knowing that, hey, actually, I think I'd rather keep this song for something else rather than like give it to the church. Or if the church says, we love this, we're gonna promote this, we're gonna, then you say, okay, yeah, like, but I feel like when it's the blanket publishing thing, you're almost scared to bring in your heart, because you're like, I don't know, what if this is like a
Right.
song I've been trying to write for 10 years and it comes out
Right.
here, and then
Right.
like I lose control over it.
Well, and it's in the agreement from our side that we will do our best to obtain someone's publishing in that respect, but it is not a given.
Yes.
Meaning, I want you to see the value in why this makes sense.
Yeah.
Not that, oh, if you don't do this, then you're out. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yeah,
it really
exactly.
does need to, like, let's honor the songwriters in our churches, not like make it that much harder.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's talk about distribution.
Yes, so
We
distribution.
got one more point, and I want to respect
Yeah.
your time.
Distribution. So practically, we've now recorded these songs, whether with a producer or with someone in your church. You have filmed them if that's part of what you're doing. Now it's time to how do we actually get it in the hands of our church? There's multiple ways. So before we signed a record deal, we did it on our own independently. So there's a company called STEM. So STM.is is one company. TuneCore is another. And basically what you do is you work with these companies, and they're the ones that help get it on Apple Music and Spotify and iTunes, and they distribute the songs.
They make it accessible.
Yes, to the different spots. And there's usually a percentage or some kind of fee attached to that. Sorry?
STEM
STEM?
is the first one.
STEM.is is the website. That's why I would say that. STEM.is.
STEM?
STEM. The reason why I liked STEM was because publishing does get tricky when you're on your own. STEM allows you to actually go in and assign the writers and their percentage, and they automatically pay everybody every time they're streamed or download or whatever. So it just took a lot of the thought work out of it for because our church isn't a record label, right? Your church is not in the music business. So to say to accounting, hey, we got to figure out royalties and all this stuff, was just too much.
Like a deer in headlights.
And I think now TuneCore has something similar. But look into either of those. They're very good. I think do your research, ask questions. I mean, I think we're past the day and age where it's like, oops, we're gonna put it out, and if it blows up, we'll figure it out. You know, like do your homework. Like if you guys feel called to this, like do it well, and do it right, and honor the people that are involved in the process.
Yeah.
Know that most people are not getting rich. So, that is most.
Do you, as everyone know about PROs in here? Yes.
No.
Are you with? If you're with one, raise your hand. If you're not with one, raise your hand. So I would say this is a value add. We didn't plan on talking about it, but just to touch over it, PROs are performing rights organizations. They're really based in Nashville, the three major ones, BMI, CSAC, and ASCAP. And they all have writer representatives there that you can go and say, hey, I'm a songwriter. I want to register my songs. So that in the world of if you write a song called Glorify, if a church picks it up or hears it, they will help you with your royalties on that. And it's just a good relationship that we have access to in Nashville, where most of them will grab a coffee or you can come into the office to talk about your songs. So I would say that is a good relationship to have and to try to maintain as a place of knowledge and information for you. Yeah. Okay, the last one.
Yeah.
Can we do the last one? We're so over, I'm sorry. Number 7, okay, it's 3 things. Celebrate every step of the process.
Good.
Number 2, don't rush the process. And probably the most important one, keep the process pure. So number 1, celebrate every step of the process, which anytime we're met with resistance, it's like, it is for joy, my brothers. You're like, it sure don't feel like it is for joy. That is like, when we are hit with resistance, celebrate that. Because God is moving something that causes the enemy to go, I need to stop this. I need to entangle this. Number 2, don't rush the process. It's easy to go, ooh, I like the results of releasing songs, but don't rush it. Build your culture. That is the most important thing. Invest into your teammates that are there in the church. Don't rush the process. It takes a long time to build a good thing.
Because if you don't celebrate along the way and you're just waiting for the big celebration when it blows up, well, if it doesn't blow up, then what, right? Like, no, celebrate the fact that we wrote a song.
Yes.
Celebrate the fact that we introduced the song. Celebrate the fact that we recorded the song. You know what I mean? Like every step, make it clear that it's not about a result of a hit. It's just, the biggest thing I can tell y'all that the Lord impressed on me at the very beginning was, you just need to walk.
Yeah.
Somebody has to just walk. You just have to do it. You can't wait for, this divine, so, you know what I mean? Like this thing of like, all right, Lord, this is the song. It's like, no, walk, write the songs, release them. Okay, great. That was kind of cool. Let's do it again. Let's just keep releasing, because so many times we put so much into one release, and when that release doesn't do whatever it was that we thought, then it's like, I don't know if it's like, no, let's just be like, all right, let's do it again, rinse and repeat. And you'll see like your church connecting. Like I said, a couple months ago when we released the current record that we had, we did a Sunday where it was nothing but original music. And it was like, if you walked in on a Sunday and had never been to our church, you would be like, where are these songs? Like, just because the church sings them the same way that they do any other. And the reality is most people aren't as invested as we are, let's be honest. So they don't, a lot of people come up to us and go, that new Hillsong song? That's so good. And you're like, that's not Hillsong. Like, we wrote that, But they just don't know. They don't know. So teach the songs that your church needs to sing. Not the hits.
And I'll say, for keep the process pure, there are people on your team that are like, why are y'all doing this? Because if you're going for fame or you're going for that next hit, I don't want to be a part of it. And so as leaders, as stewards, it is really important that we're going to the Lord and say, search my heart, oh Lord. Mike and I, luckily, we were able to team. It was like a little bit of a Batman Robin situation here. Where Mike was technically
She's Batman.
director. Yeah, you should see it. It's great. No, but literally, technically, Mike was director and I was coordinator. But we were constantly going back and forth. Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Hey, let's just remember why we're doing this. Like, have a partner if you have that blessing that you can bounce your thoughts off of, somebody that'll keep you accountable. Because when we would get flustered because our team would be resistant, one of us would calm the other down and say, but why are we doing this? Or like, that's not our job. Our job is to keep our heart pure.
Yeah.
And people will catch it eventually, even if they don't right now. And so that, I think, keep the process pure is the most important thing. Otherwise, you're building it on sinking sand.
Yeah.
It's not going to matter what you do.
Any other last questions before we? Yes.
Are y'all like the main worship pastors, or are you just like the song?
I'm not. I'm a worship leader, and just recently got asked to be our worship pastor.
Cool.
Hey, girl.
So
Have you
really,
had
really,
any trouble ever, like, we're not the worship pastors, but we've been called in to help develop the writing culture?
yeah.
So we're working under the worship pastor, so in moments you can feel a little, so like, have you had experience with that? Or like, and we're like friends with him, but it's like,
Does
no,
he
like,
not want to be a part of your writing process?
yes.
Oh, he does.
It's all in. So I didn't know if you'd ever run into like any conflict with that, or
I would say the major conflict we would run into from people who weren't in it with us was their perception was, well, you can't be the writer and the vocal lead of this song. People are going to be like, oh, this must be their thing.
Oh yeah.
But our response was, our worship team knows our heart.
Yeah.
All the worship leaders know Mike and I's heart, so that if we were the voice on a record, it wasn't to lift our name.
Yeah.
It was like,
And I love what y'all are saying about worshiping together and all, because I think that is what builds that trust.
And like I said last night, it's not, make it, well, again, it's your house, but we focus more on, this is a house of songs, not an artist.
Yeah.
We are not here to build a band.
Yeah.
We are here to write songs. And those songs can be carried by anybody. And yes, there are going to be key people that are part of carrying it, but there's always going to be fringe. You know what I mean? Where it's like, man, this girl, she's got something on her, but like this song, I mean, literally every time we go to record, we just pray over the songs. And it's like, who do we hear God telling us to sing each song?
Yeah. We even got a girl who is an incredible vocalist, loyal to our team. She was not the voice of a song on this last record, and I had to have the conversation where I was like, hey, I just want you to know that we value you, even though you are not a voice on one of these songs. But when we talked about it, it was because there wasn't a song where we would set her up for a win.
That's right.
There's going to be a song that's perfect for that voice, and she goes, you know what? 5 years ago, I might have been like, I'm out. But she goes, I love what God's doing in our team. It's because she's owning where we're at. She doesn't have to be the voice of the song. So it's having those uncomfortable conversations from the ground up.
That's good.
And if everybody knows your heart and vision leaks, then you'll be so unified in the approach of releasing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Sorry. Go have lunch. I'm sure you're starving.